Well, great. That brings us to our third section, and that is really around safety. So, safety is one of those interesting topics that comes up a lot, and it is well, there's a couple of big reasons, right? First, of course, is everybody wants to, kind of prevent employee injuries for all the obvious reasons. But also, it's very expensive for businesses when there is a huge safety, issue in place, or when there's a potential for massive safety issues. So we can lose down, we can have downtime. We have, worker time lost, due to injury or illness. And of course, we come back to good old brand reputation again. I thought it might be worth just kind of, reiterating some of the statistics around safety and all those things that are driving it. For those of you that aren't that, adept at what the safety stats are, there's 846,000 injuries a year. 15% of all non-fatal injuries are in the supply chain manufacturing space. And it costs that industry $58 billion a year. So it's a hugely expensive problem when we talk about safety. Not only that, you have the innate cost of that safety, but there's also the regulatory costs of that. So this is an example of a fine that was charged to an organization, a manufacturing organization, $1.2 million, specifically because they had workers who were being injured through the same kind of safety violations over and over again. So not only do you run the risk of the damage to your employees and the harm that they could come to, the costs associated with them missing work and what it does to the business, but then you've got regulatory penalties that can come into play with that as well. So very expensive. And for those of you that don't know whether or not safety is a big deal, I promise it is. If we look at just 2022, last year, there were over 5,000 slips and falls that were logged with OSHA violations, the safety violations, not the falls themselves. We've got things like, respiratory. We've got things like whether or not they were wearing the right gear and the right equipment. 1,700 forklift violations. I mean, Tolga was talking about forklifts before. We hear a lot about forklifts. We have a running joke actually at Kibsi that we know a lot about forklifts. We've seen a lot of forklifts in videos. And I always find it really fascinating that there's over 2,000 OSHA incidents around ladders. So definitely want to be careful with your ladders. Average violation cost is $15,000, and the repeat violations can cost as much as $150,000. So obviously it's expensive to kind of mess that up.
So again, I'll give you three examples and then a couple of customer stories. The first example is PPE, or just let's call it safety processes and gear. So safety gear comes in all kinds: hats, vests, glasses, gloves, special shoes, smocks, whatever they might be. First of all, there's a surprising amount of complacency on the part of employees in following and wearing the right gear. They might wear it on the way in, but it gets hot and they take something off, or they take it off at a break or for a snack and it doesn't get put back on right. And from a supervision point of view, you probably can't always watch every person to make sure that they're wearing the PPE at all times. But what can see them at all times is the cameras. And so this is an opportunity to develop like a safety score kind of system. Let's say, here's how we're doing as a team on kind of overall compliance with safety. And let's imagine if we could change the number on the wall from days since accident, which is super reactive, right? That number goes to 0 when someone gets hurt. What if we could say our current safety score? We're 90% compliant. We want to get to 99% compliant. And now you've got a different kind of number, a different kind of metric that you can rally around and incentivize the team around besides just the end result of an accident. This one is really important too. Not following procedures on how a machine should be used. This happens a lot with kind of fast moving machines where your fingers could get stuck. And maybe there's some processes where you need to be manipulating the machine with your hands, and other times when it's very dangerous to have your hands near the machine, kind of depending on what part of the process we're in. And if those processes are not followed, somebody could get hurt. And the thing that surprised me learning about this is it's usually the more experienced employees that get hurt, because the new person is probably learning and following the process. They're being watched more carefully. But the 20-year employee has done it 10 times. It's never been a problem before. And on the 11th time, it injures him or her. And so that's a really important consideration here too. And then finally, forklifts, loaders, reach trucks, these things are the number one cause of injuries and fatalities in the industrial environments. And understanding more about their behavior, understanding about proper usage of this equipment can really prevent really sad accidents from happening. So let's look at this one kind of safety conscious customer who did have one of these machines that, you need to get your fingers in there to set the machine up. But then once it's running, you need to get your fingers out. And if it jams, you shouldn't stick your fingers in to unjam it until you've de-energized the machine. But, the employees have gotten so used to the jams, and they know if they just, stick their finger in and fix the jam, it'll keep going, that's the tempting thing to do. And so this was resulting in lost fingers, amputated fingers, sometimes more than one at a time. And so here we're looking for the machine's current state. And mind you, this is not a digitized machine. There's no IoT interface to this machine. We're watching the machine to understand what state it's in. And then we're watching the human behavior to see if what they're doing is appropriate for the current kind of state of the machine. Similar customer, actually same customer, similar problem here with the forklifts as we've talked about. The forklifts get too close to each other. They get too close to other humans. They get too close to the building or the racks. And they maybe go too fast, either too fast in the absolute sense or too fast for the conditions, like around a corner. And so here we're tracking all the forklifts and understanding kind of where the kind of hot zones are, where highest risk areas are, heat mapping out those flows, and trying to both manage the kind of safety score metric I talked about earlier, but also maybe provide intelligence that can help optimize from a safety and performance point of view, the placement of objects so that the forklifts can be safer in their movements. End of the day here, it's about preventing injuries. It's about reducing cost from those injuries. That cost comes in the form of direct sort of employee compensation or insurance compensation for the injury, but also comes in the downtime it created, the regulatory overhead, the regulatory scrutiny that it invites, and in the brand and reputational damage of being, potentially known as an employer that's injuring workers. That doesn't really play well in the media. So there's a lot to understand about safety. It is an area with a lot of ROI if you can put some dollars to the cost of both the injuries and sort of the brand piece.